Hello and welcome to the latest webinar from Essent. Today we're going to show you how a business management system with configurable workflow lets you build in what makes a company successful. In a competitive marketplace, workflow helps set a company apart. What you do, how well you do it, and how consistently you do it helps create the value of the business. So you want to be able to build that into your business management system, and today we're going to show you some of the ways to do just that. My name is Doug Brill. I'm the Essent Marketing Coordinator and I specialize in the promotional products industry. I'm also your moderator for today. Before we begin, a very brief overview of Essent. Essent is the leader in providing comprehensive business management solutions since 1981. Essent has been serving distributors, decorators, and suppliers in the promotional products industry since the year 2000. And more than $3 billion in commerce flows through Essent Solutions each year. We expect that you may have some questions, but in an effort to keep the webinar concise for everyone in attendance, we prefer to only answer those questions offline. So you can feel free to use the webinar control panel to submit your questions, and we'll be more than happy to answer them for you after the webinar has ended. So when we talk about workflow, we're referring to the processes and activities performed on a day-to-day basis. We're talking about the processes and activities that bring transactions from start to end. And we're talking about the unique way that an individual company does business. When it comes to creating the value of a business, a lot of people might first point to the products and services they sell. And that's true, that creates a huge value for the business. In most marketplaces, however, there are going to be competitors who have similar items at similar prices. So now, how is a company going to set itself apart from the competition? So one way for a company to set itself apart is what it does, how well it does it, and how consistently it does it. In other words, workflow helps create the value of the business. So ideally, a company wants to make workflow a part of its business management system so that that value is baked right in. But there are some barriers to doing that. Most companies are using standard software. That's what makes the software standard, after all, is that most companies are using it. But that forces a company to be standard as well. It's the same platform that possibly their competitors are using. So the software isn't designed for the way you do business, and you may even have to conform your business to the way the software works. Custom software can be tailored to your workflow, but it comes with some barriers. Beyond the custom development, there are going to be ongoing costs for security, support, and maintenance, and they can add up pretty quickly. So the solution is configurable software. It's tailored to the way you do business, but it doesn't have those steep barriers of custom software. With configurable workflow, companies define their processes and activities for each step of the transaction, from product research all the way out to accounting and beyond. Then the company can configure the business management system to carry out that workflow. And finally, the system knows that workflow and it will alert the appropriate staff when it's time to perform those processes and activities for each order. So in effect, with configurable workflow, you tell the software what needs to get done, and then it tells you. And with that, here to bring you a closer look is your presenter, David Jungling. DJ is a sales executive for Essent, and he's also a specialist in the promotional products industry. DJ is going to tell you more about how configurable workflow lets you build in the workflow that sets your company apart.
Well, thank you, Doug, and hello, everyone. I thought it would be a good idea to start off by elaborating a bit on how workflow works. Even for the most complex transactions, workflow is a pretty simple equation. A certain scenario happens and the corresponding activities are performed. Every company does it differently. But each transaction represents dozens of activities and processes that take it from start to finish. Configurable workflow means that the company defines the way that it does business. Then the company configures the software system to have staff carry out business that way. So here are some typical ways that a company can have the system initiate workflow. One is by product configuration. Another is by order status. Timelines can also trigger workflow, as can exceptions. So let's take a look at how workflows work by product configurations. Rarely are two transactions the same. In some industries, like the promotional products industry, every order is customized. So product configuration becomes a crucial, yet also often complex exercise. In the Essent Business Management System, product configuration presents itself as a simple series of survey questions. And answering the questions can initiate the workflow. So let's say one of the survey answers indicates that the product configuration includes new artwork. So that's going to kick off the workflows that's associated with new artwork. So now the system alerts staff that this transaction is going to require a workflow for the tape creation. And this does the same thing for proofing workflows. So just by configuring the product, the system generates the work associated with the details. In other words, building the order builds the workflow that goes with it. The type of order and where it stands in the order life cycle can also serve as the trigger for the workflow. Orders need certain action at certain points in the transaction cycle. What you need to do when the order is submitted is obviously different than what you need to do once it's delivered. So in a business management system with configurable workflow, you can define the processes and activities that need to be performed based on where the order stands. When the order is first submitted, for example, the system can initiate production scheduling workflow. And then when that order is in work in progress, the system can trigger another activity, such as delivering a status update to the customer. And on order completion, the system can trigger a review of the order and invoice before they're actually sent to the customer. And finally, when the order is closed, it can trigger workflow for follow-ups with that customer. So a company can configure the system to initiate the company's own workflows for each part of the order lifecycle. The system knows the workflow for each step of the way. Now, workflow isn't just a matter of what needs to get done, it's also a matter of when it needs to get done. So you want to be able to build in what needs to get done and in what time frame. In the Essent Business Management System, you can configure workflow to set up processes and activities for a certain number of days out. Let me show you a couple examples of how a company might set up a workflow based on timelines. So a company could configure the system to remind sales reps to follow up with a prospect in a certain amount of time after a sample has been sent out. Or it could remind them to follow up with a vendor, let's say 2 days after the order has been submitted. Or it could send a customer a personalized card 1 week after the order has been delivered. And you can even configure expedited workflow for rush orders, so that follow-up with the vendor, for example, can be 1 day or less instead of 2. Again, the workflow is configurable by the company, so the activities and when you need to happen can be set up specifically for you. But the bottom line is the system will know what needs to be done and when, so all of your sales reps will know what needs to be done and when. We've talked about configuring workflow by product configuration and by order and by timeline. So now let's take a look at management by exception. Managers don't need to know every detail of every order, especially those routine orders. So management by exception refers to a practice where only matters outside of those routine operations are brought to the attention of management. And a business management system can be configured to initiate workflows when exceptions are met. So let's take a look at some exceptions that could initiate workflow. For example, if an order falls below the minimum margin, that could be a situation that calls for extra scrutiny. So the system can kick off a workflow for an approval process from a manager when this exception is met. Or maybe an order comes in larger than the company routinely handles. That could be more units than the routine order, or maybe there's more costs than the routine order, or both. So it's going to be an extra important order. So there could be workflow for additional reviews of that order. Now, most orders are not canceled, so that might be another exception that calls for a closer look. The business management system can kick off a workflow to reach out to the would-be customer and find out what happened and why that order was canceled. So by definition, most orders are routine. When exceptions occur, however, a business management system with configurable workflow can notify management and initiate the extra tasks required for that exception. Now, configurable workflow makes it easier to manage by exception. So most companies know the way that they want to do business. They know the workflow they want, the activities, the processes they want to carry out through the order lifecycle. So what's the advantage of building that into your business management software? Let's list out those benefits first, and then we can discuss them in more detail. So the first major benefit of configurable workflow is that workflow is now standardized and centralized. In addition to that, training time will be greatly reduced. Mistakes are going to go down significantly. You get a system tailor-made to your business without the need for custom development. And you're going to get what we call well-formed orders, which are complete, accurate, and ready for efficient processing right away. We'll start off with standardized workflow because that sets the basis for some of the other benefits. With workflow built into the business management system, the workflow no longer exists in a cumbersome sales manual or in a far-flung notebook or just in somebody's head. Companies with workflow built into their business management system now have one central repository for the way the business does its work. So maybe you have a veteran representative and they never forget to follow up after they send out a sample. But now with built-in workflow, the system helps ensure that every time that happens. So the company defines what needs to be done and the system automatically initiates workflows and alerts the staff members who need to carry it out. Standardized workflow forms the basis for the second benefit, which is a reduction in training time. Since the workflow knowledge is built in, now everyone has access to that same knowledge as even the most seasoned representatives. New representatives, they don't need to memorize each activity and process for an optimal transaction. The company simply configures the optimal workflow in the system, and the system helps ensure the workflow is carried out. And then in addition to reducing training time, configurable workflow also greatly reduces errors. There's no more forgetting a step, and that's because the system's going to remind staff to perform those steps. The system can also be configured to make sure an order doesn't move forward without the required workflow. So for example, a distributor wants to make sure the artwork is all correct before it submits a purchase order out to that supplier. So the system can put that order on hold until it's confirmed that the artwork has been approved. The system helps ensure that everything needs to be done before an order is done, before it moves forward. Now, one of the biggest advantages of configurable workflow is that a company gets a business management system tailored to the way that it does business. But getting a tailored system doesn't come with the hardship of custom development. Because custom development is great for getting software that works the way you want it to work, but that always, what comes next? The company is on its own to handle the support, they're on its own to handle maintenance and security for its one-of-a-kind system. So those costs quickly surpass the cost of the software itself. So configurable software is the best of both worlds. Functionality tailored for the way that you do business with support, maintenance, and security handled by an experienced technology solutions provider. And finally, configurable workflow is going to help a company build what we call well-formed orders. Now, well-formed orders are complete and accurate. They start right and they stay right. And that sets them up for the most efficient processing possible. Since the company configures the system for what needs to be done throughout the order lifecycle, the system knows what's needed for each transaction. So orders are less likely to move forward with missing or inaccurate information. An artwork approval workflow means that the order is less likely to have faulty artwork, for example. If the purchase order goes to the supplier with mistakes, that's going to cause problems and delays for both the distributor and the supplier. But the configurable workflow helps make sure orders have everything they need. So we've looked at how workflow works. We've already looked at the advantages of configurable workflow. Now I'd like to briefly discuss workflow management specifically within the Essent offerings. With the Essent Business Management System, workflow management is going to be built right in. The Essent Business Management System is an enterprise-grade system that handles every step of the transaction lifecycle, from quoting all the way out to accounting. And that's one of the major differences between Essent Workflow Management and the others. It's part of a comprehensive system that's used to run the rest of the business. So you've seen a lot of those standalone software that specializes in workflow management, but if workflow isn't ingrained in the system that carries the rest of the flow of the business, then what's the use? Take something like a tape creation, for example. With integrated workflow, the tape creation information can now flow into the quote, to the sales order, to the invoice, all the way out to accounting. With a standalone software, it's outside the system and it's easy to miss. So Essent has a cloud-based business management system. That means the workflow is going to be available anywhere on any device, whether that's a desktop, a laptop, a smartphone, a tablet. So let's say that a workflow is triggered for artwork approval. Now that artwork can happen from anywhere, whether the person approving it is at home, in the office, at a trade show, or even at a client's office. Workflow is now visible and actionable anywhere at any time. Now, we've just said that workflow is part of the overall business management system and that it's available everywhere. And those combined lead to another advantage of workflow in the Essent business management system, and that is notifications. When workflow exists outside of the business management system, it's easy to ignore or bypass the workflow. It gets left behind. If people aren't manually checking the workflow piece, it can become quickly forgotten. But the Essent business management system, on the other hand, that will send notifications to those who need to carry out the work. Some standalone workflow software will also do that, but there's nothing that ensures the workflow is completed. And that is where alerts come in. If the workflow is not completed, the business management system will know, and it will flag the transaction to recommend it doesn't move forward until the workflow has been completed. So workflow in the Essent business management system is going to be part of the overall BMS. It's going to be available anywhere at any time on any device. And notifications and alerts are going to help make sure that the workflow gets carried out every time for the most efficient transaction lifecycle possible. And with that being said, I'd like to turn this back over to Doug, and he can tell you how you can learn even more.
Thank you very much, DJ. Essent is dedicated to providing efficiency in the promotional products industry and beyond, and our solutions support all of the capabilities that we discussed today. Essent has configurable workflow within the Essent business management system, so companies can identify the processes and activities that make them successful. Then they could build that workflow right into the business management system for more efficiency. To learn more about workflow management, you can visit essent.com/workflow management. There, you can review everything we discussed today, and you can also use that page to get in touch with an Essent representative for a free consultation or to see the Essent business management system in action in a demonstration. Again, that's essent.com/workflow management to learn more. And thanks again to everyone for attending today's webinar. Go with the flow for a more efficient workflow and a more efficient business.